So let me talk a little bit about telephone recovery support. I only have 300 slides left. You're almost near the end. I'll get there. So telephone recovery support is we call because we care. When I first got into AA, one of the first things you're told to do is get a list of phone numbers. And if you're about to drink or call those phone numbers. Somehow I missed that second part. I never really wanted to call a lot of those numbers, and so I never did. But when somebody called me, I really appreciated it and talked and talked and talked. And so that's what this is about. We call people once a week to check in on their recovery, and it works tremendously well. These are some of the quotes. I like that Constance says that my volunteer is shared in every victory I've had in my recovery since the calls began. And she's also been called for more than a year. We have some people now that have been called for more than 3 years, and it's not broken, so we don't fix it. We don't say that you're done after 12 weeks or you're done after 20 weeks. We keep going as long as they want to receive the call. Cynthia talks about being out in a rural area, and even when she relapsed, we still called. We didn't kick her out of the program, because that happens in a lot of treatment settings. If people relapse or use while they're in treatment, what happens? They're thrown out. That happens in the United States. We don't throw them out because they've relapsed or on the phone. That's when they need the call the most. And she says she didn't feel so all alone. And Curtis talks about him making the calls now, being the phone call that I never got. So it's classic win-win. Not only the person receiving the call, the person making the call, they both benefit. And a lot of times it's the people making the call that benefit more. You should hear how they just light up and how enthusiastic they are to make these calls. What are the numbers? Last year we enrolled 1,200 people in telephone recovery support. Average length is 15 weeks, 5 years nearly. Our volunteers made 27,000 outbound calls. We talked to someone nearly 7,000 times. And so we helped many of them get back into recovery once they relapsed, and that's a real triumph as well. I often think about those 7,000 conversations about somebody checking in on somebody else. Can you imagine the spiritual ripple effect that has through Connecticut and that community? Just those little acts of love and concern and kindness. And Connecticut is a population of 3 million. That sound familiar? Let me talk a little bit about Recovery Works. That's our employment program, and this is just a 7-part continuous curriculum. And the people that enroll in the curriculum, they're asked to enroll in telephone recovery support and then contribute 20 hours as a volunteer, so they get that kind of experience, so we can vouch for them. It's not uncommon for somebody to receive service and provide service with us. Does that make sense? So you can be receiving telephone recovery support calls once a week and also be one of those people making them. So we believe that you can do that on both ends, and it's proven effective. We established a database for people who are recovery friendly and understand what it means to hire someone in recovery, and we're also provide training to those employers as well. Last thing, we have another thing about our housing. Jot down findrecoveryhousing.com, and this is really about independently owned, privately operated sober houses, safe places for people to live once they want to get into recovery. And you can see we have, the other part to this project is we established a coalition, and we also help people open these houses as well. And there's a lot to that. We just kind of organize all the data and try to get more recovery housing. You'll see that it's a national database now with more than 200 houses across 11 states, a national association. You see the pricing for the website, and we've had over 20,000 views of these houses. So what it's like, you can go and look at a sober house, see how many beds are available, see what their rent is, see what amenities they have, all online, and it's up to the owner of the house to go online and update their information. It's kind of like if you had a place to rent, a rental property, that you can look on that. It's taken off, and it's beyond what we ever thought. We have over close to 70 houses in Connecticut alone. So if somebody needed a safe, sober place to live, they just go on this website, look for bed availability, search it by location even, and they can have a place to stay, oftentimes that same day, where they will be in sanctuary from having to use alcohol or drugs. Make sense? Recovery coaching, this is kind of a cross. It's a little different than a sponsor in AA or a counselor or a case manager, a personal guide and a mentor. Usually another person in recovery, doesn't have to be, and we provide extensive training to help people walk through with another individual, come along side by side, meet that person where they are. The best way I can describe a recovery coach is really to look at this picture. And this is at our walk, and that band means that woman has 21 years of recovery. Anyone with 10 or more years gets a purple sash and a number to commemorate their recovery. They're called the Honor Guard. The Honor Guard walks in front of everybody else, gets to the top of the hill, splits apart, and the rest of the people walk through. Just a very powerful experience for everyone involved. And you can obviously see that the younger lady there is listening, and she looks a little emotional to me, but that's what recovery coaching is about. Loving the person you're working with, and listening and giving advice when asked for. Make sense? The basis of this is our volunteer management system, and it's modeled after a hospital, and you can see some of the volunteers, what they said. Tanya really, and she's still with us, she has learned to love herself through being in that position to give back. One lady said she was just out of prison for a few weeks, and she came into the center. We were doing some kind of little meeting, and she said, most places I go to for services, I get a handout. This is the only place, really, that asked me for a hand up. So we in turn valued her contribution and ability to contribute, and that made all the difference for her to stay in recovery. So we modeled this after a major hospital. We do all the screening, interview, background checks. We do comprehensive orientation. We evaluate. We have a huge dinner in April to recognize their contributions. And it's grown. And the reason we do that is because I told you our staff is small. Our volunteer force now is about active at any given time is near 300. And in turn, they can reach more people than we could possibly reach as a staff. So staff's kind of mode of operating is to always work and support the volunteers. And in that way, we can go to our funders and show them how our system has grown over the years. In 2005, on the bottom, we had 90 volunteers the first year we put this in. They contributed 3,450 hours, and you multiply that by the Connecticut volunteer rate. Each state has a volunteer rate. I don't know if they have it here, but by 2010, we had 319 volunteers give us more than 14,000 hours of service. How many people did those 319 volunteers help? I wish I knew. We don't know. We don't have our hand on that. We do know that many of those 300 volunteers are still in recovery today because of their opportunity to give back. You good? All right. Read this. Read this in the book in the handouts about anonymity. And one of the reasons I'm very passionate about giving back is I did this research when I first started working for CCAR 12 years ago, and I was a little uncomfortable about always disclosing my story. And Harold Hughes tried to start this movement many years ago, and he talks about hiding your recovery or passing on your recovery. And Bill White refers to him as well often. We have sustained the most harmful myth about addiction disease, that it is hopeless. And without examples of recovering people, it's easy for the public to continue thinking that victims of addiction disease are moral degenerates, and that those who do recover are the morally enlightened exceptions. Very powerful. And the reason I talked a little bit about why I'm in recovery is, you remember my son Matthew? This verse from the New Testament had such a powerful effect on me, I wanted to name him Matthew 5:14 Valentine. Sandy wasn't having any of that. So he's Matthew James today, not Matthew 5:14. But what that says is, you are the light of the world, and a city on a hill cannot be hidden. And I believe God worked such a miracle in my life. I mean, from holding that baby strung out on cocaine to having a family now, a home, a life worth living, purpose and meaning in my life, that's a miracle. And who am I, literally, to keep that in church basements, if you get the analogy? Why am I hiding it down there? Why am I anonymous? It's not for everyone. I'm not saying it is. But I'm sure that this message resonates too, and I encourage you to be outspoken about your recovery.